Okay, so onto the patterns. What I'm going to do first is take my craft knife and I'm just going to cut all of the design lines on that side of the last. Okay, at this point you can remove any excess tape that you don't need anymore. So we'll start by removing these pieces one at a time and laying them on paper. So I've got some pattern making paper here. It's actually wallpaper backing. I actually find it's pretty much exactly the same stuff, but way cheaper. You can also just use normal printer paper if that's what you've got to hand as well. Alright, so I'm going to do a technique that's kind of like mirroring, and that's how I'm going to get my pieces to go on the other side since we've only done one side of the last. So I'm going to start with the easy pieces, which are these two back ones here. And what I'm going to do is just fold this piece of paper in half. And then lay the pieces on there. So we'll start with this back one. Okay. And you just want to put the straight cut that was from the back directly on the fold and then sort of lay it flat like that. And I'm going to do the same with this one here. Just placing it right against that fold. Alright, so I might zoom in a little bit to show you the next steps. With pattern making, we have to think about how each piece is going to fit together. So I know that I want this little tab here to sit underneath that one. So I'm going to add about a centimetre or 10 mil for that to sit underneath there. So I like to call that underlay because it's going to lay underneath that one. So I'm just going to add that there and put UL. And at the bottom here, I want to add some lasting allowance so that we can wrap it underneath. And I always add about 20 mil. So I'm going to put an extra 20 in there as well. And that's lasting. And then just sort of neaten the whole thing up a little bit. I'm going to make that piece of leather a raw edge, so I don't need to add any folding allowance on there at all. Okay, so let's do this top piece now. I also want that to be a raw edge, and that's going to sit on top of this one, which tells me that I don't need to add any allowance to the bottom at all. So I'll just neaten out that line so that you can see it. Now for the top, I actually want to stitch that in with the upper. A lot of this will make more sense as we go, but I want to add about 5 mil into the top there. And that's sort of like a folding allowance so that we can put that in with the rest of the upper. So I'll just write fold in that area. Okay, so it should look something like this now. And then what I can do is go ahead and cut out those pieces through both sides of the paper. Alright, so when you open the pieces out, they should sort of look like this. And I know that that's underlay, which means that that's going to sit underneath that piece like that. All right, so we'll put those two to the side and then we'll keep working our way across. So let's move on to the next piece. I am going to actually take this and make it one piece, and then I'm going to add that eye stay on top so that we're getting a bit of a bulk to the sneaker. So I'll just start by taking them off separately and then I'll add that on. So just use your pencil to lay that nice and flat. Let's add in a couple of things here. First of all, I want to put this back in because I actually want that piece to sit over the top so that it again adds a bit more bulk. So I'm just going to figure out where they were before and just roughly mark out how far they should come. Okay, so it's sort of coming out about that much and just following that line out like that. Okay, and then we'll take our eye stay as well and put that on there. Okay, so I'm just gently placing that down because I am going to move it and put it elsewhere, but this way I can trace around it first. And at that point, I usually just bring it straight down like that and just kind of match it across. Okay, and then we'll put this over there and come back to it later. All right, so at this point, let's just neaten out all of these lines and start to put some of our allowances in. All right, so first things first, I want to put a folding allowance across the whole top line here, and I'm going to do 5 mil for that. Okay, so that's our fold. I'll just put an F there. And then we want to put our lasting allowance down here, which is going to be 20. And I'll put an L there for lasting. All right, I'm just going to add in one more allowance here. I'm going to do 5 mil down the back, and this will be our seam allowance. Okay, so where I've got this allowance here, I'm actually going to take some of that out because I only want to sort of fold the top line just after where the laces are going, sort of to about there. Because we're going to do what's called a bagged top line for these. So the pattern's now going to look like that. So that's our fold, that's our seam, that's our lasting. A bagged top line is where you stitch the two together and then you fold it outwards. Okay, so next what I want to do is the pattern for my eye stay, which I don't actually want any allowance on because this is going to be a raw edge. So the only thing I have to do is really neaten out the line and add an underlay allowance to the bottom. Okay, so the underlay allowance is because the eye stay was coming down here like this, and it kind of wants to just sit underneath there like that. So I'm going to add 10 mil to the bottom there, and that's UL for underlay. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll go ahead and cut these pieces out, and then we'll move on to the next few pieces. All right, so the pieces are starting to come together now. That's how that side piece is looking. If you imagine, I could now place that eye stay over the top, and that sits in there like that. We've got that little tab in the back there, and that one goes under there like that. So we can see it's starting to piece together as a puzzle now. But the last two bits we're missing are our front section here and our tongue. So placing those to the side, I'm going to do the tongue next. So I've just taken another piece of paper and folded it in half. And I'm going to peel the tongue off. And again, I'm going to place it directly on that fold. Alright, so at this point we can just draw in a nice tongue shape. I'd probably bring it up a little higher because we can always trim it down later if it's too much. Maybe sort of something like this. There's really no right or wrong with tongue shape, so don't overthink it. But I am just going to bring that side bit out and just kind of meet them up like that. And then what we want to do is we want to put an underlay in here because this front piece is going to sit on top of that. So again, we're going to put sort of, maybe put like 15 mil here just to be safe as a beginner. Okay, so the tongue shape is now looking like that. This is underlay. And the top of the tongue, I'm actually going to leave raw. Okay, so there we have our tongue pattern. And now we can move on to our last piece. So again, I'm taking a long piece of paper and folding it in half. Alright, so I've got this folded piece of paper. I'm going to take that last bit from the front, placing the front on the fold, and just letting that sort of roll naturally where it wants to go. I'm finding that it's a little bit difficult to lay it flat here because of the curve in the last, so I'm just going to put a few little snips in there. Alright, so this paper's all a bit wrinkly here, so I'm just going to cut that off. Alright, so I can add my allowances in here. Alright, my video cut out there for a second, but what I was working on was this front piece, and all I've done is added a lasting allowance of 20 mil to the bottom edge. So when I open it out, it looks like this. So at that point, I can start to see how all my pieces are going to fit together. First of all, I've got this one here. I've got my side piece, which is kind of in there like that, and my eye stay, which goes under there, and then that top piece sort of sits over the top. So you can start to visualize it a little bit now, how all the pieces will come together. At that point, you could just take this one and flip it to get the same situation for the other side. Alright, just to make everything really clear, I like to draw in all the additional pieces. So I'm just going to draw in this back piece. Alright, so you can see I'm starting to plot out all of the pieces so that it helps me understand how I put it together. I like to sort of do the same thing here. I know that that piece is going to sit over the top like that. So sometimes if you kind of draw in the underlay like that, then I know that when that gets put in there, it sort of sits underneath. These kinds of things just will help you when you're piecing together the whole pattern. What I want to do as well is create a pattern for the lining. I've got all these pieces together, and I'm just going to get myself some more paper. Okay, so for our side lining pieces, we're going to copy exactly what we've done here, but the only difference is we're going to continue that allowance the whole way. And this is something that we'll actually trim off later on. Okay, so it's as simple as that. That's our side lining piece. Now for the tongue, it's going to be slightly different, and I'll just cut that out first to get it out of the way. So we'll just label that lining. And now we will do the tongue. So for the lining of the tongue, I need these two front pieces. And I'm going to start by placing the tongue itself down, and then I'm going to place that front section over the top. And I just want to sort of line it up so that that tape line is nice and straight, like that. And what this is going to do is tell me how long it needs to be. So I'm going to trace sort of around there like that. And then I'll get rid of that one. And then I'll just trace around this exactly as it is. And then you can just kind of bring that out. Okay, so once you've done that, you can make the lines a bit darker and smoother. Okay, and then we can go ahead and cut that out too. So we've now got our lining pieces, and just remember that this one would flip to get the other side as well. And our upper pieces like that. Okay, and that is our sneaker pattern.